The iPhone 5S is 5 years old now, but I think it deserves consideration even today as a great budget iPhone. It's crazy to believe, but 5 years ago, in September of 2013, Apple introduced the iPhone 5S. Despite its status as a positively ancient smartphone, in a world where we generally are expected to use a phone for no more than 2 years or so, the iPhone 5S is remarkably still supported under iOS 12, and in a rare move for Apple, actually received special attention in an effort to make the phone more usable this time around. This is essentially Apple giving its users a nod of approval to continue to use this aging smartphone for at least another year or so. So I decided to put this claim to the test. For the past month, I switched to an iPhone 5S that I bought off of eBay for $80. I swapped my SIM card and powered down my iPhone 7 Plus, stowing it away in a drawer like you would a laptop on an international flight during takeoff. The first thing that I thought was this: how in the world did we ever use phones this small? Honestly, I'm amazed we all used phones like this. I moved from my iPhone 5 to the Plus iPhones since the 6 Plus introduced the segment in 2014, and it's really tough going back. It's especially funny using this phone after the controversy surrounding the 4-inch screen on the 5 when it came out in 2012.
But the new screen on iPhone 5 is a 4-inch display, so the same width, but taller.
It's 18% thinner and 795% taller than the previous iPhone.
Looking back, in 2018, this all seems like a fuss over nothing. It's hard to believe that we made such a big deal over the switch from a 3.5-inch to a 4-inch screen when Apple just introduced a 6.5-inch screen on the new iPhone XS Max. After I got over the incredulity that I ever used something so small, I noticed something else. This phone has a great form factor. Its small size makes it perfect for holding and using with one hand, and the perfect size to put in your pocket without even noticing it's there. Granted, the screen is very constricting by today's standards, especially if you come from a larger phone like a Galaxy Note or an iPhone Plus, and it certainly takes getting used to. Text appears much smaller, buttons are harder to click, and the keyboard is damn near unusable. Now, I have gotten very good at touch typing on the plus-sized iPhones. I can fly along at light speed, and I chortle at the dictation button as it offers its feeble hand to me as I race along the keys. My tune has since changed. Never before have I ever used the dictation button as much as I do now. If I have to write more than a quick reply, I have to either go landscape mode or talk to my phone like my grandfather. This is by far the biggest drawback to this form factor. Now, despite all of this, especially coming from my dependence on larger phones, the form factor was, until pretty recently, marketed as a benefit. The iPhone SE is proof positive of this. The phone was pretty much the exact same design as the 5S, but with newer guts. Sadly, Apple killed this phone off in its most recent iPhone event in favor of the much larger iPhone X series. As much as I love my plus-size iPhones and the newer, larger screens, the 5S is from a time where one-handed use was a feature, not a constraint, and it shows. If you successfully use an iPhone 8 Plus or any Plus iPhone with one hand, call me. There's literally no way you can do 10 minutes of web, email, text, Snapchat use with just one hand. But on the 5S, you can. Everything is within reach. Okay, here come 2 hot takes that may or may not please or anger you. Hot take number 1. This is arguably the best looking iPhone ever made. Hot take number 2. This is the best shade of space gray that has ever been put on an iPhone. Now, don't get me wrong, the iPhone XS and the new XR are really handsome devices, and they're very attractive. But if we consider longevity, the iPhone 5S is 5 years old, and it still looks really nice. This phone is just classy. It's made of smooth aluminum with tasteful yet easily scratched chamfered edges that reflect light, making the phone glitter when you use it. And the tasteful glass inserts on the back break up the otherwise solid aluminum, giving the phone a sense of balance and quality without being easily shattered like the iPhone 4s or the iPhones of 2017 and on. One thing's for sure, and that's that this phone certainly punches far above its $75 to $100 price point. And speaking of that price point, this isn't me getting a crazy deal like I have been known to in the past. If you go on eBay and look up iPhone 5S, you'll get literally pages of nice refurbished units in the $75 to $100 price point, depending on color, carrier, and capacity. But above everything else that I've talked about so far, the most important thing is that an iPhone needs to be usable, and this phone certainly is. I used the 5S for about a week on iOS 11, and don't get me wrong, it was not a bad experience, but it felt like a phone that needed an upgrade. Now, on iOS 12, the thing really has a new lease on life. The difference in speed is, for the first time that I can recall, noticeably better under this newer iOS. Under iOS 12, apps open quicker. There's less of the typical keyboard lag that iPhones tend to get when they age, and in general, everything just feels smoother and better than it did under iOS 11. Make no mistake, it's still an older iPhone. It lags and stutters, and you can certainly notice that apps have to relaunch more often instead of staying open in the background, as the device struggles to cope with its limited resources in RAM and CPU. But it's certainly usable. And honestly, you're not missing out on too many of the modern iPhone features. This little guy has a more than adequate 8 megapixel camera that shoots 1080p video with 720p 120 FPS slow-mo capability. It has Touch ID, LTE support, and a 64-bit processor that prevents the iPhone 5S from feeling too antiquated. More than anything though, the iPhone 5S harkens back to a simpler time in smartphone development. This phone has no gimmicks, no flashy features meant to impress the press.
While Note's advanced water carbon cooling protects against overheating.
A flood illuminator, the front side camera, and a dot projector.
This is just a really good phone. When the 5S was released, it was clear that the priority was to improve upon what we already had, not trying to find some new thing to increase sales. It was faster with 64-bit architecture. It was easier to unlock and more secure with Touch ID. It had a better camera and introduced slow-motion video. That's pretty much it. There's nothing too fancy or flashy going on here. That's what makes the iPhone 5S so good. This is a phone that was designed to be as good as a phone can be. There's no compromises, there's no innovation for innovation's sake. It's just good. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Honestly, I've really enjoyed my time with the 5S over the past month. I bought it thinking that this was kind of going to be a ball and chain dragging me down for a month while I used it to prepare for this video, but I've been very surprised by how much I like this device. And as much as it took me a while to get used to the small size, and I'll be honest, that's not going to be true for everyone. Some people don't like gigantic phones like I do, but once I got used to the size, it's just a really great device to use. Honestly, I really liked having the headphone jack back. Also, there's a little bit of a psychological aspect here because I had the iPhone 5 when it came out, and for some reason when the iPhone 5S came out, it just looked a lot more expensive. I think it was the space gray looking a lot cooler than the matte black that was found on the 5. And something about that new Touch ID looking home button and the new camera it just looked super classy and expensive. So even today when the phone is only like $80 and is just barely supported, I still think that it looks expensive and made me feel kind of special. Anyway, that'll do it for today's video. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Miani. Don't forget to join my subreddit. The link is down in the description below if you have any questions or have some discussion that you would like to start. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video.